Thus says the Lord, all you who are thirsty, come to the water. This is the first sentence from our first reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah. And that statement, I think, begs the question, where is it that we get our water from? More specifically, when we are stressed, when we feel alone, when we feel afraid, where do we get our water from? Certainly there are any number of vices which can oftentimes be a great temptation in those moments of trial. Things like pornography, masturbation, gossip, excessive dependence upon material things, unhealthy relationships, and the list could go on. That's certainly one option for us to fall into. One trend, though, that I've seen more recently, it seems, in addition to all of these things, is technology. Of course, on the surface of it, technology makes our lives better. And before you even discount what it is that I'm about to say, this is not one of those Jesus hates technology homilies. In fact, I would never give such a thing. I'm a big proponent. It makes my life easier. But yet, I have seen over the years how it is that people kind of enter into that as a way of soothing that discomfort that we all feel, that aloneness, that loneliness. I've seen kids drop out of school because they spent too much time on the internet. I've seen people nervously just staring at their phones for fear of having to interact with those around them. The list could go on, but the reality is right in our faces. This technology consumes us. And I think that there's a deeper subtext to this whole issue. And it's this. I think that we all feel this loneliness inside, that all of us have. This spot in our lives that is meant for God and for God alone. So we try mightily to cover it up with other things, to make it go away. Technology is one option. There's any number of others. A good friend of mine once said, unless we learn how to be alone with ourselves, we will spend most of our lives lonely. My brothers and sisters, it's that process of coming to know ourselves, to being comfortable with that part that will never be fully understood, that part which is meant for God. It is there that the divine stirs. It is there that God speaks to our hearts, and our attempts to cover it over with a blanket does not do us any good. For those of you who think, oh, this is just a bunch of kind of religious gobbledygook, we see that same manifestation, that same loneliness in other ways. For example, there's the great artist Pink, not known for her religious love or devotion, but in one of her recent songs, she writes the following: have you ever hated yourself for staring at the phone? Your whole life waiting on a ring to prove that you're not alone. Certainly, this is a feeling, an emotion that all of us experience. The beauty of what it is that we celebrate here, this first reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah, is because it calls us back to who we fundamentally are meant to be. Listen to this. Why spend your money for what is not bread, your wages for what fails to satisfy? Our culture promotes these things that fail to satisfy time and time and time again. So we continue to go out and pursue maybe the next thing. All the while, God, from within, calls out to us, begging of us to spend time to come to know the deep love that he has for us. We hear it again in this same reading. Come to me, heedfully, listen, that you may have life. My brothers and sisters, if your deep desire is to have life, then get comfortable with being alone with yourself, because it is there that God speaks to our hearts. those parts of us that we just simply cannot express, are meant for God and for God alone. And it is God who will give us life, who will give us peace, the true peace, not the temporary stuff that we so often try to cover things up with. While preparing for this homily, I fell upon this quote. It says the following: "A good deal of frustration in human relationships results from a failure to recognize that there is an inescapable element of solitude in every human life, which not even marriage or the most intimate of friendships can evade. That is, indeed, something which each person must respect in themselves and in others as the most precious thing about them." When we are tempted that next time to escape into whatever it is that we prefer to escape into, let's ask ourselves the question, why? Why and how does that give us life? It would be a sad thing for us to wake up one day and to realize that what we thought had been life had only been a partial breath. That would be a sad reality. What these readings are calling us for, what our Christian message and vocation calls us to, is fullness of life. And that is fullness of life rooted in God. That's what it's all about. I saw this image just last week while I was on vacation. I had the chance to go up to my family's cottage. And as I was walking, there was this beautiful sunset settling in over this incredibly calm lake. And just before me, there was this young boy sitting in a chair with his feet in the water. Beautiful. But then as I looked closer, that individual wasn't taking in the sunset. He wasn't doing anything but staring at this phone, 2.5 inches wide by 4.5 inches tall. And you say to yourself, you're missing this beautiful sunset. How could that be? My brothers and sisters, when we escape into whatever it is that we escape into, we are doing the same. But yet God calls us this day, this night. Let go, look up, and come to the water.